Hi everyone, this is Veronica. Today our topic of discussion is about Indian Performing Rights Society IPRs. So we'll discuss about this society because it has been re-registered and they have filed a case against famous film producing group because of the violation of certain things. So we'll discuss in detail what is the issue, but more importantly here we'll discuss about what is the portion from it that could be asked in the exams, right? For my video updates and queries, you can connect with me on Instagram and Facebook because I feel together we can make a difference. So now what is the relevance of this topic in your exams? This is the main thing. You should, firstly, it will be covered under NGO, self-help group, civil society. Civil society is very important. So in detail here also, I will discuss about the civil society thing also. And at objective level, what is Indian Performing Rights Society? Subjective level, you should know about civil societies and their functioning in our country. So in what context today we are studying this? See, the Economic Offences Wing of Mumbai Police, they have registered a case against a film producers for alleged criminal breach of trust and failure of payment. So this FIR was filed by IPRs, that is Indian Performing Rights Society, and this is their first criminal case which is initiated by this kind of society after it has been re-registered as a copyright society in 2017. So now talking about IPRs, what is this society? See, they are a representative body of artists. So in these artists, they include the people like music owners, composers, lyricists, publishers of the music. So what they do, they collect royalties of the artist if their work is used anywhere from a wedding to a New Year function or on radio, TV, in other words, wherever music is played. So here we'll discuss let me tell you what is royalty. See, whenever you produce a work, for example, you made a song, somebody wrote it, so the words belong to someone, the lyricist, then somebody has composed the song, the composer or the singer, and then a house has published it. So now what happens? The artist, the lyricist and the composer, they get royalty for their work, that whenever their song will be used, they will get a certain percentage from it whenever it is used. So that is known as royalty. So this particular society, what they do, they collect royalties on the behalf of these artists. So this body was set up in 1969 and then they re-registered themselves as a copyright society also in 2017, following which it started functioning actively. Now see, the IPRs, they have their offices in Mumbai, and you have heard about Javed Akhtar. He is a very famous lyricist. He is the chairman of this society. Now, next thing that you should know, how this society functions. So, in 2012, amendment in the Copyright Act 1957 laid down that artists would get 50% of royalties every time their work was used. So, even if the copyright remained with the production house or the music brand, the royalty will be given to the artist for their work. So it meant that every time a song was played, say whether in a hotel or on a radio station or it is streamed in your mobile applications, 50% of royalty would go to the production house or the music company. So here the problem was they have registered a case, filed a case against the company because they have not given them their payment which was due as per the royalty agreement. So now see, here the other 50% would be split between the lyricist and the composer of the song. So IPRs is responsible for collecting this 50% royalty that is due to the artist involved in literary work accompanied to music. So while even individual artists can theoretically approach the users of their work directly, but it is very cumbersome process. It is likely to be a difficult and long drawn out process. So they depend upon the IPRS society. They register themselves. So as a member of IPRS, they have better infrastructure at their disposal so that they can press their claim and collect the money which is due to them. Because otherwise if they go alone to ask for the royalties, it is a very difficult and cumbersome, complex process you can say. So that is why they have made this community, this society IPRS, which represents these kind of artists who have registered themselves with this particular society. Now, how does the process of licensing with IPRS works? So IPRS, they have a database of around 10 million songs, which even includes your Indian songs, international numbers for which it collects royalty. if cases of in cases of big events, IPRs generally they approach the event organizers beforehand and they inform them about the licensing required to play the songs of artists who are registered with them. So most online streaming platforms, they are registered with IPRs and licensed to use the artist's songs, and then after being re-registered as a copyright society in 2017 under amendment, they have amended Copyright Act, the IPRS has sent letters to all the media platforms asking them to ensure that artists are paid 50% of the royalty as per the Act. So this is how the licensing thing works. So here on the thumbnail you might see that there is a case between IPRS and YRF, Yash Raj Films, but obviously we don't have to go for the masala news. We need to see what could be asked from this topic in your exam, how this is relevant. It will show its relevance in the examination, right? So now let's jump to the civil society. Like, what is a civil society? So the society considered as a community of citizens which is linked by common interest. So all the people in a particular society like this, they have common interest and collective activity. So that is a civil society. So it is an aggregate of non-governmental organizations and institutions that manifest interest and the will of all the citizens. So basically it is referred as the third sector of the society, which is not government, which is not private. It is a third sector, a society, civil society. Now, what is the need of such a society? If you see our modern democracy, the role of technology here. So there is a control which possesses such a power that has never been seen in the history. Yet our citizens, we people, we are vulnerable and helpless sometimes, despite we have a lot of rights given in a democracy. We possess a lot of rights also. But again, a democratic state decides to terrorize, kill and drill fear in them. Then here the civil society plays its role. So even the market in present times, it lacks the moral sense. Everybody is so selfish. They just want to see their monetary benefits. Then it is very important here that there should be a third sector which would look into such things. So it is supremely indifferent to human suffering. It has neither sympathy nor room for citizens. Here we are talking about the market. So the state can exploit such citizens by its own need for resources, labor and profit. So such a scenario calls for the intervention of a civil society to protect the interest of the citizens, and as it is only sphere that stands between the individual and state, okay, through petitions. So okay, we'll come to it. So this is the sphere which stands between the individual and the state. You understand this point? So now such kind of associations, they have capacity. What kind of capacity they have? Like, they can challenge the violent power of the state through what they can do, civil society. They can file petitions, okay. Then they can have protests. Dharnas could be given. Then ultimately your judicial activism is always there. So when the political parties are totally unresponsive, citizens can access centers of power and privilege only through vibrant civil society. Now next thing is, what has been the role of civil society in India if we talk about the past. So like you have seen the human rights groups, they have become custodian of fundamental rights chapter of the Indian Constitution, because whenever they are violated, such societies, they raise their voices. They have investigated cases of arbitrary imprisonment, if there are custodial deaths, deadly encounters. So civil societies have always come up. Then these organizations have carefully documented the causes and the triggers of communal and caste violence also, and they have established an excellent achieve on the abuse of power by governments. So they have protected the rights of the vulnerable sections of the community, of our own people. For example, there are tribal people, Adivasis, the Dalits, Muslims. They have shouldered the fight for the rights of the oppressed section in the society. That is the role of, such is the role of civil society. But obviously there are criticisms also. Why there are criticisms? Because all the society, civil society groups, they do not work for the cause of society. They are involved in the business because they think that they will get the funds from the state and they will become rich. So all they do and make this civil society for money. They are money oriented, right? So that is why here sometimes civil societies are criticized. Some sections of media, they are often covered down by their corporate bosses and the temptation of fame. That is what we are seeing in the media these days. Either they're biased towards A party or they're biased towards the B party. We don't see a neutral media. So that is why where their corporate bosses play this role, then few sections are involved in excessive protest, eventually hampering national interest, because sometimes government has to take some decision in the national interest also. But again, if you are protesting like anything, excessive protests are there, then it also hampers the national interest. And too often, even your progressive global civil society organization, they even do not meet the standards of transparency or the accountability that they demand of others. Because if one civil society group which is internationally recognized, they demand something other from a civil society, but they do not look into the mirror that what they are doing. So unhappily, the majority of Indians, they keep quiet when their fellow citizens are tortured by the police. They are stripped of access to resources and livelihoods, lynched, exploited by corporate India, and neglected by the mainstream media. So that is where these criticisms for the civil society, they come in. So to conclude, we can say that civil society, it actually forms the backbone of the democracy. It is very important because democracy does not just revolve around what happens once in 5 years, that is your election time, but how rights of the citizens are protected and are allowed to hold power holders accountable. So civil society, they get their strength from Gandhian tradition of volunteerism, but today it expresses itself in many different forms of activism also. So the state must respect the articulation of politics of voice. So here I'm using this phrase, politics of voice. That is what civil society is doing. So the state should respect this articulation and not just the politics of vote. The promise of democracy can only be realized through collective action in civil society. So this democratic state needs a democratic civil society, and a democratic civil society also needs a democratic state. So they are interdependent on each other. They mutually reinforce each other, right? So this is about civil society. So today we discussed this IPRS society, their case. I just mentioned it, but what is more important is about this society and what is a civil society. So that is all for today. Thank you.